Hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Cassinson, and I'm with Build Exact. Build Exact is thrilled to have you guys joining us and being leaders and having interest in building more sustainable, carbon-free electric communities, homes, and buildings. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am very honored to have two knowledgeable speakers here today from Rewiring America. Rewiring America, as you can imagine, is growing super fast. It's a leading nonprofit for electrification in our industry, and they are a great provider of information, as you'll find out today from the presentation. And then I think our presenters are going to direct you to more information that you can connect with after the webinar today as well. Noah Goldmann will be presenting along with Luis Agarre Torres. You can correct me on that later, Luis. But Luis is a senior advisor at Rewiring America, and Noah Goldmann is a policy analyst. So if you could, Luis, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll pass it back to Noah, and he can tell us more about himself, and he can start the presentation. Luis?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody that, making time to join us today to talk about, what's in it for me in the Inflation Reduction Act. I am a senior advisor at Rewiring America. I focus on identifying what we call rewiring communities. We're trying to identify those communities that are ready for electrification, and ready for electrification really means that all the pieces are there, political will, there is contractors, there is companies wanting to be part of this and take advantage of the opportunity. So my job is to really try to understand the market to see how we can advance electrification. And now I'm going to pass it on to Noah.
Awesome. Thank you, Luis. And thank you for being here with us today. I just wanted to let people know that we will be looking at the chat, and we will have some time probably at the end of the webinar to answer some of your direct questions. Plus, Luis and Noah will leave their contact information if you want to reach out to them separately. But thanks again for joining us. And Noah, let's kick it off.
Great. Thank you so much. It's nice to be here. I'm Noah Goldmann. I'm a policy analyst at Rewiring America, and my mission is specifically IRA implementation and communication. So it's great to be here with you all and to talk more about the Inflation Reduction Act and what it means for builders and remodelers. I'll just start off, I think, by grounding us a little bit in what we know and what we don't know about the Inflation Reduction Act and about electrification more broadly. So I can wax poetic about the ins and outs of the IRA for a while, which I will in a few minutes, and introduce you to some of the details about the specific incentives and programs available in the IRA. But I'll admit that there's a lot that we don't know yet in terms of implementation. And so we're still waiting on guidance from DOE and from IRS, and then also sometimes from state agencies. So there's definitely still uncertainty, and we're committed to overcoming that uncertainty and sort of making sure that we track the implementation developments and keep communicating that outward. So I'll be able to share a lot of information, not the complete picture yet, but please jump in with questions, share them in the chat, and we can try to address them and share as much as we know about the Inflation Reduction Act. Okay. So I thought I'd start just by sharing a little bit more about electrification broadly. So when we're talking about building electrification, we're talking about 5 main things. So electrifying the cars we drive, how we heat our homes and water, cook our food, dry our clothes, and maybe also where electricity comes from in terms of rooftop solar. For the home builders and remodelers out there, the first point, the vehicles might not be as relevant, though EV charging is definitely in the picture, but we'll focus on the heating and water heating electrification, and maybe we can touch on food and how we dry our clothes too. There are some really compelling reasons to electrify, and I'll share. We can talk about the economics and the incentive picture in a few minutes. But first, I thought I'd share from the consumer perspective that electric alternatives are, I think, the future. They reduce air pollution, they improve user experience, they cut both construction and operating costs. So we've gotten a lot of good press recently in terms of the potential of these electric alternatives to improve consumers' lives, and I think that'll just keep coming. So just like we know that EVs are more fun to drive, you step on the pedal and off you go. The acceleration is way quicker. That's the same thing with induction stoves and with the new electric HVAC machines, the heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. So there are lots of compelling reasons to electrify. I think also consumer demand is headed in that direction. So people are worried about the health impacts of both indoor and outdoor pollution. We've heard that gas stoves increase air pollution inside. Gas furnaces can increase air pollution outside. In New York City alone, for example, building pollution causes over 1,100 premature deaths each year. So I think that's going to become more and more of an issue to solve for. And then electric alternatives are also just, as I said, they're the better choice for a lot of consumers. So heat pumps, even though sometimes we make it sound like they're new and flashy, they're really not new. So heat pump water heaters are on their 4th generation. Cold climate heat pumps are on their 2nd or 3rd generation. By the time most consumers get to them, they'll be on their 4th generation too, and they can work basically anywhere. And as lots of heat pumps that are variable speed or inverter driven can deliver better temperature control. They don't have to blast on and blast off like your traditional furnace does. And heat pumps are also a 2-in-1 machine, and they can both reduce heating load and cooling load. And in that sense, they're much more convenient for your average consumer. I'll also share that from a resiliency standpoint and from an energy security standpoint, there are compelling reasons to electrify. So as more consumers get rooftop solar and batteries and buy the electric F-150, then they'll want to be able to use those batteries to power the appliances in their home. And so you can't use the Ford F-150 Lightning to power your gas furnace, but you can use it to power an electric heat pump. So that's all to say that there are lots of compelling arguments, and when it comes down to it, electrification is where the market is headed. So you have the consumer demand, and you have the policy incentives, which we'll get to, and you also have economic tailwinds. So the reality of electrification is that it's cheaper in a lot of cases, not all cases, but especially in new construction. All electric new construction is often cheaper. So this is an RMI study that found that in 9 markets across the country, all electric home construction is between a few $100s to several $1,000s cheaper than a mixed fuel home. So I think that evaluates a furnace, a water heater, AC, gas range, gas dryer, and a new gas line. So when you add up all of those subtotals, electric is clearly the way to go. I do think it's important to distinguish between electric new construction and electric retrofits. So as you can see here, electric new construction is very often cheaper than mixed fuel or than new gas construction. Electric retrofits, they are almost always will reduce operating costs, but it's really a question of how much. So there are still some markets and some homes where maybe electric construction or electric retrofit, will reduce energy bills by $100. Maybe that's not enough for a retrofit project to pencil out today, but there are lots of projects, the vast majority of which will deliver hundreds of dollars of savings a year, and that can help those projects pencil out pretty quickly. So the average household that electrifies could save $1,800 a year on their energy bills. A lot of that is driven by the electric vehicle, but if you just disaggregate and look at space and water heating alone, electrification would reduce energy bills for approximately 100 million households in the US. So that's a ton of households. That's most households in the US across every zip code, every fuel type. And those households would save $500 on average. And you can look at this little chart in the bottom right and see that the savings are biggest with electric resistance and fuel oil, propane, those delivered fuels. For natural gas, sometimes the savings are smaller. Sometimes the natural gas to electricity retrofits won't pencil yet. So I think that's just that'll ground us as we move forward into talking about the IRA incentives. But I think it's also it's important to talk about just the IRA as an opportunity, as a market opening opportunity. It's predicted that 900,000 new contractor jobs will result from the IRA, from tens of millions of additional heat pump installs. So this is just these are jobs, these are installations, this is money changing hands that's just up for the taking for contractors and home builders who want to pursue this future. I was just looking at the budget estimates for the Inflation Reduction Act earlier today, and if you add up all of the provisions that we'll talk about in the rest of the presentation, you'll get to around $45 billion in direct spending into the economy over the next 10 years, with even more private capital leveraged on top of it. So it's really just a question of how much of that $45 billion each individual contractor and builder and remodeler can get their hands on. And the ones who know these incentives and who can talk to their consumers, their clients about these electric alternatives, about heat pumps, about heat pump water heaters, will just stand to capture a bigger and bigger slice of that potential market. And just to hammer home the point that in 2022, heat pump sales are exceeding gas furnace sales. So the momentum is all sort of facing forward into this electric future, into a growing market and more opportunity to capture. So hopefully that grounds us in some compelling stats for the policy side of this discussion. Luis, do you have anything to add about the opportunity side?
Well, just that it all makes sense. I mean, if you think about, what's happening to the world in the last 3 years, right? I mean, we're dealing with, issues with equity. We're dealing with issues, the post-COVID economy. We're dealing with extreme climate events. So when you think about, the industry and the market that we're talking about, we're addressing climate resiliency, we're addressing economic resiliency, we're talking about moving vulnerable occupations to more resilient occupations. And that tells you, if you look at the amount of money that the government is putting in, and if you think about how much money it's going to unlock, how much investment is going to come from the private sector following this is not just an opportunity for this year. This is the new way of doing things. This is the new industry. So there are very compelling economic, climate related and productivity reasons to move in this direction.
Thanks, Luis. So as we talk about moving in this direction, I think the IRA, as we've said, will really jumpstart this movement. So the consumer demands, the policy tailwinds, the economic reality will all sort of get kicked in the pants as a result of the IRA, and will make a lot of these projects pencil quicker, and will sort of expand the market even further. So we'll jump straight into the incentive programs. I listed some of the relevant programs here. I know that it's a lot of jargon and it's hard to read a table quickly. So rest assured, we will go through this line by line. But I just wanted to give you a sense of the landscape of these incentives that exist out there. So it's a lot. It's a lot of money, a lot of programs, but that's why we're here, to try to communicate some of the ins and outs of the legislative text. Some of these programs apply to new construction, not all of them. I will note which ones do as we go through the presentation. I'll start at the top with these contractor training grants and contractor incentives generally. So the IRA includes $200 million of state-based contractor training through the next 10 years. So these are financial assistance to states and to non-governmental organizations to develop workforce programs specifically geared towards helping contractors take advantage of the rebate programs that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. And then in addition to the training itself, there are contractor incentives. So we'll talk about the rebates. There are two different programs, the electrification rebates and the efficiency rebates. The electrification rebates include $500 of a contractor incentive per project. So that's a pretty significant incentive for contractors and builders to take on this work. And then the efficiency rebates include an incentive for the contractor of $200 for each project that's located in a disadvantaged community. And then in addition to those incentives geared towards the contractor, there are prevailing wage incentives and apprenticeship requirements for both 45L, which is the new energy efficient home tax credit, and 179D, which is the commercial buildings tax deduction. Okay, so we've gotten through contractor training. Now we'll talk about contractor training and contractor incentives. Now we'll talk about the rebates programs. So I'll just start up front by saying that these programs are not available yet. I know that there's been a lot of hype about certain programs becoming available in 2023. We'll get to the tax credits. They're all available now, but the rebates will likely not be available until the end of this year at best, and maybe even next year. But the good news is that it gives us plenty of time to plan and to have conversations with consumers and contractors and make sure the rebates actually work well when they do hit the market. So the electrification rebates we'll start with. These are point of sale rebates, so upfront discounts up to $14,000 for low and moderate income households that install qualified electric appliances. So these rebates will cover 100% of costs, again, up to $14,000 for low income households, which is defined as less than 80% of area median income. And they will cover 50% of costs for moderate income households. So that's 80 to 150% of area median income. There are max rebate levels per appliance. So under that $14,000 cap, there are some caps for heat pumps. For example, it's $8,000 for heat pump water heaters, $1,750, and on down the list. So if you had a low income household, so less than 80% AMI, who buys a heat pump for $8,000, they'd get $8,000 of an upfront discount, and they'd have to pay nothing out of pocket for that heat pump. For a moderate income household, they would get $4,000 of an upfront discount, so they would only be on the hook for the remaining $4,000. There are efficiency standards for the appliances here, so appliances do need to be Energy Star certified to qualify for the electrification rebates. Multifamily buildings also qualify. I don't know how many of you work on multifamily buildings as well, but if 50% or more of the occupants are low or moderate income, then the incentives will ramp per eligible unit. And then just one other thing to note here is that the value of the rebate must be passed on directly to the consumer. So there is the $500 contractor incentive that will go to contractors. The rest of the rebate, the full value of the rebate, needs to go straight to the consumer. And so the electrification rebates do cover new construction, but the income verification requirement will pose some challenges here. So since you need to verify that the occupant of the new construction is going to be low or moderate income, that poses challenges. So this might be overcome by sort of steering the new construction electrification rebates funding to affordable housing or something like that, or just making sure that the future households fits the income requirements. The next rebate program is the efficiency rebates. So a similar rebate program that incentivizes energy saving retrofits, but the efficiency rebates are specifically rewarding retrofits and energy savings, whereas the electrification rebates are rewarding one-off appliance replacements. So the efficiency rebates will reward energy savings of at least 15%, but it ramps up with the amount of energy savings. The retrofits will likely include heat pumps, electrification, weatherization, all that good stuff. The amounts, as I said, are tied to energy savings. So there are two pathways here. There's the modeled energy savings pathway, which has an $8,000 cap or 80% coverage for LMI households if they hit 35% energy savings or more. And then a $4,000 cap or 50% coverage otherwise. And then for the measured energy savings, the rebates are uncapped and it's tied to energy savings, the amount of energy savings again. There are no federal efficiency standards here. There might be efficiency standards at the state level. I should mention that both of these rebate programs are administered by state energy offices, which is why it'll take time for them to hit the streets, because it has to go from federal guidance to state applications to state programs and then to implementation. So it'll take a second. Like the electrification rebates, multifamily buildings qualify for the efficiency rebates. There is no point of sale requirement here. So whereas the electrification rebates, they need to be delivered as an upfront discount to lower the point of sale costs. the efficiency rebates do not need to function in that same way. They also don't need to be passed on in full to the consumer. There's no set aside or requirement to serve low-income households for the efficiency rebates, but there is that $200 contract incentive for projects that serve disadvantaged communities. And these rebates are not eligible for new construction because they incentivize energy-saving retrofits. So there needs to be some sort of baseline to compare the retrofit to. So these rebates, I know that was a mouthful, they're sort of the most confusing part of the IRA, I think, as it pertains to residential electrification. That's because a lot of these details, or a lot of the sort of the fine-grained details, are not out yet. They'll depend on DOE guidance and state implementation plans, but we'll keep our website and our resources updated as we learn more about these programs. The rest of the incentives are tax credits. So these are, I think a lot of folks are more familiar with the tax credit landscape and what it looks like to file taxes and to claim credits. And there more guidance about the following incentives of tax credits is out now. So we can start with the residential tax credits. So this is 25C, which is the residential energy efficiency tax credit, and 25D, which is the residential clean energy credit. There is an IRS FAQ, so IRS guidance is out now in case you or your clients are interested in what the IRS is actually saying about these tax credits. But we'll go through them one by one. So the 25C tax credit is available now. It was available as of January 1st of this year. It provides a 30% tax credit for residential efficiency and electrification upgrades up to $3,200 per year. So that $3,200, again, is a cap. It's broken up into subcaps. So there's a $2,000 credit for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And then there's a $1,200 credit for everything else, which includes electrical panel upgrades, if installed in conjunction with the heat pump. It includes insulation, doors, windows, and an energy audit, and that's all capped at $1,200. There are efficiency standards here too. This tax credit is tied to the Consortium for Energy Efficiency's highest non-advanced tier. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with CE standards. In effect, the standards are pretty well aligned with Energy Star for ducted heat pumps, and then a little bit higher for mini splits or non-ducted heat pumps. A cool thing about 25C is that the credit limit resets every year. So for example, you could install, or a client could install a heat pump and do some weatherization. So get a $2,000 credit for a heat pump and $1,200 for weatherization in year one. And then the next year go back and take another $2,000 credit for a heat pump water heater and maybe $600 more for an electrical panel in year two. And so you can claim that credit again and again. It is non-refundable, which means that consumers need to have adequate tax liability to claim the credit. So for low-income consumers who don't have tax liability, they might be better off going the route of the electrification rebates. But for those moderate income consumers and higher income consumers who will have to pay federal income taxes, then the tax credit is a great way to go. And 25C does not apply to new construction as of the IRS guidance that's linked in this slide. And then there's the 25D residential clean energy credit. So I think a lot of folks are familiar with this one because it's been the credit that for the last 10 years has incentivized rooftop solar. So it was supposed to expire imminently, but now it's been extended through the next 10 years. It was also extended retroactively through 2022. So if you know anyone who installed rooftop solar last year and didn't claim the tax credit, now they can. 25D provides a 30% uncapped tax credit for geothermal heat pumps, solar panels, and battery storage. This is not specifically relevant to a lot of home contractors who do HVAC work, but maybe the battery storage or some electrical panel work is relevant to the audience nonetheless. Like 25C, 25D is non-refundable, but you can carry it forward to future tax years. So if you have tax liability, but it's it's less than the value of the credit, you can apply the credit to year one's tax liability and to year two's tax liability if there's credit left over. And 25D does apply to new construction. Okay, so we've covered 25C and 25D. Now we are on to 179D. So these next two credits, 179D and 45L, these are no longer residential facing, consumer facing credits. Now these are business facing, contractor facing credits, developer facing credits. So 179D is the energy efficient commercial building deduction. So this is a deduction for energy efficiency retrofits of commercial buildings. That includes multifamily buildings of 4 or more stories. And so the deduction, you need to hit at least a 25% reduction in either annual energy costs or energy use intensity. And then the incentives ramp up to a 50% reduction. So if you hit that 50% energy reduction and you meet prevailing wage requirements, that can be a deduction of up to $5 per square foot. This is a deduction, not a tax credit. So for example, for a business, if your client is in the 20% tax credit, for example, $1 per square foot deduction will be worth 20 cents per square foot after taxes. IRS did recently release the reference standard for new construction. So this obviously applies to retrofits, but for new construction, there's the ASHRAE 90.1 reference standard. It's out now. And the deduction can be transferred from non-taxable and non-commercial entities like schools, government buildings, to the architects, designers, or energy modelers of the energy efficiency improvements. So whereas a school or a library would not have been eligible for the old version of 179D, now they are, because they can transfer the value of the credit to the designer of the plan. Okay, we're nearing the end. So the 45L new energy efficient home credit is, as the title makes clear, this is the credit for new homes, new construction. So for all of the home builders out there, this one is the most relevant. It was extended for the next 10 years, and it's tied to both EPA Energy Star new home certification and DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes certification. So for EPA Energy Star, the certification, the value of the credit is $2,500 for single family, $2,500 per unit for multifamily, assuming that it meets prevailing wage. And then for DOE, the value of the credit is $5,000 for single family and $5,000 per unit for multifamily, again, assuming that the project meets prevailing wage requirements. 45L was also adjusted to be used in conjunction with the low-income housing tax credit. So before, that was a problem where if you claimed 45L, it would just reduce the basis for LIHTC in kind, which sort of made any sort of combination redundant, but now they can be combined without affecting the LIHTC basis. So the results of this change should be that there are more affordable units being built at a higher energy efficiency standard. And of course, yes, this applies to new construction. And I just flagged that DOE did just release their Zero Energy Ready Homes spec for single family homes for 2024. So the old standard is still in effect for 2023, but for next year, DOE just updated their specifications. All right, so I know that was a handful, and we breezed through it, but I hope that that gave you a bit of an introduction to the incentives and the landscape available. We will continue to monitor all of these programs for implementation updates and guidelines that will be released, and will, as I said, we'll update our own materials. And we're also going to keep educating consumers about this. So we're starting as an organization to foray into this contractor engagement and interfacing with home builders, but most of our energy is still going towards educating consumers about the incentives and electrification opportunities that are available to them. So in effect, hopefully we're aggregating demand so that you don't have to, and that we can create sort of a very enthusiastic and willing client base that you can go capture. So Luis, do you have anything to add about these incentives before we turn it over to questions?
No, I think just very quickly, there is a series of grants, rebates, tax credits. It all depends on whether it's new construction or if you are doing, retrofits. It's well thought out, for low, moderate income people, but also those with tax liability. It's also focused on, training, for example, but also, focusing on contractor incentives. And at the end, the 45L and 179D, I think those two are important too, because they're expanding on something that was, or they are bringing something new to the table. And I really think that this is what's going to open the market. And I just want to reiterate what Noah said. We are in the process of, communicating this to consumers. We want everybody to be fully aware of all the advantages that the IRA brings to everybody. And I believe that by doing that, we're going to help contractors reduce, the sales cycle and be able to help, close, the customer acquisition time and cost. So I think it is a lot of us working together to make this happen. So probably we can move to Q&A. No, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, fantastic, Luis. And thank you so much, Noah. Great presentation, so much information. If you would like to, I think you said you have your contact information on the final slide. If you want to move to that, just so that people can take that down. And then if one of you or both of you can talk a little bit about resources and where you have them available so people can stay on top of what not only you, and if you could kind of separate it, what do you offer to contractors moving forward and where, and what do you offer to consumers? Because I think a lot of the contractors would like to pass the information that you're creating on to their customers or their audience.
Sure. So maybe I can talk about the consumer facing resources for a second, and then Luis can talk about some of our broader landscape engagement work. So as an organization, we have our website is rewiringamerica.org, and we have lots of consumer facing resources. I think we just updated our fact sheets on some of the tax credits and the rebates, so that if you have consumers or if you have questions about the ins and outs, more detail than I gave on this presentation, then you can go look at those fact sheets and learn even more about it. And then we have an incentive calculator for consumers to see what they're eligible for based on the projects that they want to do. So some of these credits are income limited or limited by geography, census tract. So we have a calculator on our website that all it takes is consumers inputting their house, their location, their zip code, their income, their tax filing status, and then we will tell them what incentives they can qualify for, whether rebates or tax credits or a combination of the two. So that's a really helpful resource. We've found over 350,000 people have calculated their incentives. So I think that can just give you a sense of the scale of the interest here, and lots of people are hungry for more information, which we're trying to deliver.
Awesome, thank you. And I see that we've got the calculator in the chat, so you guys can click on that and use that, pass it around. Actually, so the reason why I even gotten connected to Rewiring America, because of the sophistication of the presentation of their information, which I think is just such a great asset for the industry. And I would say leverage it, use it as much as possible, because they put a lot of hard work into it. And it's a great resource. Luis, you had some more to add? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And you're absolutely right. I think, these things are complicated, but there is the clear intention of making it easier for people. And we see Rewiring America as, one nonprofit that is entirely focused on making it easier, frictionless, for people to participate in this industry. I just want to add, and starting with the calculator, the calculator is also useful for contractors to provide quotes, for example. And, we are finding ways of integrating that into, the different systems that contractors have. We are also, trying to talk in bulk, trying to talk to some of the original equipment manufacturers. We are trying to see if we can, given the demand that we can foresee coming within the next couple of years, we could have an agreement with them on behalf of a number of contractors. And at the same time, we're trying to identify what is it that we can help with in terms of material, to educate your consumers, to educate your staff, and also working with the different states, because there's a ton of programs to expand workforce. We're working with the unions. So hopefully this year you'll get to see a lot more from Rewiring America in this regard.
I'd also love to hear if there are home builders or contractors on the call who have needs that they want to see filled in the market in terms of consumer education or reducing friction, please share, because we're trying to map out where we go from here. And the more input we have, the better job we can do, making this whole market work.
I love that. And yeah, so we're opening it up now. I can, if you guys raise your hand, or if you just put something in chat, whatever's most comfortable for you, then I can put you on to speak too. So in terms of how and when you guys feel like a lot of these resources will be accessible, because I know that right now the rebates are still, the Department of Infrastructure is still setting out how some of the processes and the plans with individual states in order to get those out. What would you say is a fair timeline to expect all those things to be in place for the IRA?
I think in terms of I can just give you a sense of the timing for the rebates. So the tax credits are all available now, but the rebates, I think DOE has put out its request for information from the public on its program design and its recommendations to state energy offices. So if there's anyone on the call who really wants to chime into DOE to offer recommendations for how those programs should work, they should. And then DOE will take those responses and formulate their own guidance to state energy offices sometime late spring, early summer. And then you can expect to see the first applications from states to DOE to receive the funding maybe over the summer. And then those applications will be approved, and then states will stand up their programs. And I think that'll probably get us to the end of the year in some states. And then it really depends on how much capacity these state energy offices have to implement programs. So we're not just talking about the IRA, because to a year before that, there was the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that also dumped a lot of money on state energy offices and on the market in general. So they definitely have their hands full. So some state energy offices that have a lot of capacity available will be able to get these programs up and running relatively sooner than the ones who have less capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think kind of like me, everyone's heads are going to explode, because that was a lot of information, a lot of great information. Really appreciate your expertise, your insights. You guys, thank you so very much. I know that you shared your contact information, your website, and I think everybody will be tracking on that as this progresses. Oh, we got a question that popped up. Is it that one would be approved for either the rebate or credit, but both? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Okay.
So I think it's asking about the stackability of these rebates and tax credits. So
Okay.
I think thank you for bringing that up. It's a really useful question to address. So the rebates and tax credits can be combined. So let's say you're a moderate income consumer and you are buying a heat pump for $10,000 and you get $5,000 off through the electrification rebates. You can then claim 25C against the remaining costs, assuming that you have that tax liability to spare. So that would lower your costs further from $5,000 after the electrification rebates to $3,500 after the 25C tax credit. So a lot of these incentives are stackable and combinable. The two rebate programs are not stackable for the same single upgrade, because in a lot of cases that would send the value of the rebate beyond the cost of the equipment themselves. But aside from that, yes, definitely the rebates are stackable with the tax credits, and the rebates and tax credits are also stackable with a whole landscape of state and local and utility incentives, many of which we're going to try to track and add to the calculator and to our own resources.
Awesome. Great question, James. Thank you for sending that in, and sorry that I bumbled it. The pros understood it immediately. So thank you again, Luis and Noah, for sharing your expertise and insights. And thank you all for joining us today. This has been recorded and it will be out on our Build Exact YouTube channel shortly. So you can share it with other stakeholders within your organization. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.